Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to invite Miss Tasia Williams, student in the Division of Arts, Sciences, and General Studies, to render the national anthem of St. Kitts and Nevis.
O land of beauty, our country, where peace abounds, thy children stand free. On the strength of will and love, with God in all our struggles, Saint Kitts and Nevis be a nation bound together with a common destiny. As stalwarts we stand for justice and liberty with wisdom and truth. We will serve and honor thee. No sword nor spear can conquer, for God will sure defend. His blessing shall forever to posterity extend.
Thank you, Tasia, for that beautiful rendition. Dr. Joycelyn Pennyfeather, Dean of the Division of Teacher Education, Mr. Fitzroy Williams, Communications Specialist, Dr. Cameron Gill, Senior Lecturer and Faculty Representative, Board of Governors of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, other faculty members, our distinguished guest authors, other published writers in this room, wonderful members of our local community, our online viewers, Mr. Vikel Edwards Douglas, President of the Student Government Association, and our students. Welcome to the 6th Annual Authors Forum. As the Director of Library Services, I say to others that a library is much more than a collection of books and silence. It is a living, breathing hub of ideas. Today, we have moved those ideas from the shelves onto the stage. This forum is our way of celebrating not just the finished book, but the courageous process of research, storytelling, regional contribution, and the writers themselves. In a world that is increasingly digital and fast-paced, the printed word remains profoundly influential. Books offer us the opportunity to pause, reflect, and document our own history, ideas, and research findings. This evening, we are honored to host a panel that genuinely reflects the diversity of both Caribbean and international experience. We will explore from the fundamental lessons of childhood friendship to the complex science of our local flora. We will address the modern challenges of career development, consider the social policies that safeguard our citizens, and ultimately look outward at our nation's role in the global diplomatic stage. To our distinguished authors, thank you for your discipline and your vision. By writing these books, you have provided our students and the general public with mirrors to see themselves and windows to see the world. To our students, I hope this event motivates you to realize that you are not merely consumers of information. You are the future creators of our story. Whether you are 10 years old, like Corinne and Naya Clark, or hold a PhD, your voice deserves a place, students, in the stacks of libraries around the world. I welcome everyone to this Authors Forum. And without further delay, let us begin this journey of discovery and this literary feast. It is therefore my distinct pleasure to officially declare the 6th Authors Forum officially open. I now invite Mr. Vikel Edwards Douglas to introduce our moderator. Vikel.
Good afternoon. Madam Chair, with your leave, please permit me the opportunity to adopt the protocol which was so ably established. It is indeed my honor and pleasure to introduce our moderator for this afternoon. Claudia Walwin is a Caribbean educator with a deep appreciation for nature, travel, and culture. Committed to lifelong learning, she enjoys both light fiction and rigorous academic study. A proud product of the Caribbean education system, Claudia attended the Joycelyn Library Primary School, the Gingerland Secondary School, and the University of the West Indies, UWI. She holds a certificate in social work, Mona Campus, a Bachelor's of Science in Sociology with minors in psychology and social policy, upper second class honors, and a Master's of Science in Urban and Regional Planning with distinction for research, St. Augustine Campus. She also earned a diploma in theology from the Cauldron Theological College, Barbados. Claudia currently serves as a sociology lecturer at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College and aspires to become a social planner. Guided by her faith, she lives by the conviction that God is in control. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in putting your hands together to welcome our esteemed moderator for this afternoon, Miss Claudia Walwin.
Thank you kindly, Vika. With all protocols being established by Mrs. Daniel, I would like to extend my own welcome to everyone present, especially the students. This is a forum for you because it helps with your learning, and we never stop learning. Reading is one of the few acts where silence becomes revolutionary. When we read, we grow in empathy, imagination, and even longevity. This evening, we celebrate not just writing, but the quiet power of reading that changes societies one page at a time. So again, welcome everyone to the 6th Annual Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College Authors Forum for 2026, where we will feature 5 illustrious authors. So a warm thank you is extended to all of you on behalf of the librarian, Mrs. Sonita Daniel, and her staff, Dr. Moya Rotham, interim president, and Ms. Wanda Hughes, vice president, and the entire board and body of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College. Throughout this evening, I will provide you with some fun facts before reading the profile of each of our authors. We trust that you have come with a thirst for knowledge, and this would be for the edification of all present and all viewing. Our featured speakers and literary showcases feature the book Chronicles of Corinne. Let's talk about friendship. And the author, Miss Corinne Anaya Clark. Let's welcome her warmly. Oh, I was a little bit too excited to hear from Corinne, so I'm to read her bio right after my fun fact. So you can stand right next to me, Corinne. Corinne Anaya Clark is a young author, literacy advocate, and cultural ambassador with big dreams and even bigger impact. By the age of 9, she had already made history as one of the youngest authors in the Caribbean. Her Chronicles of Corinne series, which began when she was just 4 years old, celebrates gratitude, Caribbean culture, and youth empowerment. Through her writing and public appearances, Corinne continues to inspire children to read more, dream boldly, and embrace their voice with confidence. Beyond books, Corinne founded the Chronicles of Corinne Book Club to create a safe and engaging space for children to discuss ideas, explore Caribbean stories, and connect with authors across the region. In 2023, she launched the inaugural Chronicles of Corinne Children's Book Festival in Trinidad. Building on its success, she hosted the festival in St. Kitts and Nevis in 2025 and is set to do so again this year, further expanding her mission to promote literacy, creativity, and cultural pride throughout the Caribbean. Corinne has been featured on talk shows and news platforms across the region and internationally, including a 2024 feature in Forbes magazine. She has addressed students locally and abroad, served as a motivational speaker in major events, and continues to champion access to books and learning opportunities for children everywhere. She is also the reigning junior Calypso monarch of St. Kitts and Nevis. Through her work, Corinne is now not only writing stories, she's helping to shape the future of Caribbean youth. Ladies and gentlemen, Corinne. We'll get it for you. Huh? No, you go. I thought you came to fix the mic. Okay.
Can you see her? Yeah. Come. It's better for her this time. She might slip and
Any other short person coming up?
Excuse me, let me bring it.
Don't break the people laptop.
All right. Let's test the pen.
Testing. Okay.
Stand up. Please.
So how do you do this?
You want it? I'll use it.
Oh, bye.
Yeah, that's it. So you use it. Go ahead, I'll sit there just a minute. Go ahead.
My journey as an author. How it began is actually a really interesting story. When I was 4, I started reading when I was 2, so from then I had read a lot and I wanted to write my own book. And I tried to tell my mother, but she didn't listen, neither my father. So every day when my mom would work on the couch, this is during the pandemic, I would pull up a table and a chair next to her and I would write it on my own. And that first book is what some of you know as Chronicles of Corinth, 7 Days of Fun. My books are my life, my experiences, and the things that I learn. Having 10 books at my age is a great accomplishment, but it wouldn't have been possible without support and parents who always encourage me to dream. When I do school visits, children always ask me how I was able to write my books. Well, I dreamt that I could write a book, I believed that I could make it happen, and I achieved it times 10. Some grown-ups tend to underestimate children and put limits on us. I think it's important for all of you to know that we are capable of great things. We're children and we haven't really lived it out yet, but we can dream, and with support, it's only a matter of time before our dreams are a reality. To the children here, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something big. Don't allow anyone to convince you that your dreams are too big. If you're willing to do the work, there's literally nothing you can't accomplish. And if people say you can't do it, look at them like that. As I mentioned before, I have 10 books published. I've been featured in Forbes magazine, which apparently is a big deal, and I have had the opportunity to speak to other children and grown-ups all around the world. I've had lots more amazing opportunities because of my love of books and reading. I'm not boasting, just showing you that books are literally the window to the world. They open our minds to new ideas, cultures, and endless possibilities. I'm almost at the end of my presentation, but before I go, I'd like to introduce you to one of the books that I released last year, Chronicles of Corinne, Let's Talk About Friendship. This book is special to me because through it I am able to show my appreciation for the wonderful friends I have and help children identify real friendships. So we're going to read a couple pages of this guy. What is a friend anyway? Before we dive into all the wild, fun, and even sometimes weird and controversial things that can happen between friends, I think we should start at the beginning. What is friendship really? To me, friendship means having someone I could count on, like really count on. Someone who's there when I'm happy, when I'm sad, even when I'm just or moody. A friend is someone who makes me laugh, who doesn't mind when I talk too much, and who notices when I'm not feeling like myself. My friends are the people I can trust. We play together, dream together, and sometimes we even get into little arguments. But real friends, they stick around, they listen, they try to understand. Friendships are built on kindness. It's about knowing when to cheer someone up and when to give them space. It's about respecting each other even when we don't agree. It's about laughing with each other, not at each other. So yes, friendship isn't just about who you sit next to at school or who lets you borrow their markers. It's about the feeling you get when you're with someone who makes you feel safe, seen, and loved. I'm lucky enough to have a few people like that in my life. Me and Alyssa. I'm almost 10 years old and I've been fortunate to meet some really amazing people who have become my friends. The very first friend I made outside of my family, though, is Alyssa. We met at a day camp when I was 4 years old. I was the new girl at camp. The day I joined, we had a field trip and we were told to pair up. Alyssa held my hand, we were walking buddies that day, and we've been besties ever since. Being besties doesn't mean we like all the same things and behave exactly the same way. While we do have similarities, there are lots of differences as well. Our thought processes aren't exactly the same though, we have disagreements sometimes. We both love music. We love to dance until we're breathless and giggling. We love playing games, making up silly songs, and swapping stories. But we don't like all the same things, and that's okay. Alyssa's favorite color is pink, and I'm a purple girl. She loves sweets, and I prefer savory snacks. Her ancestors from India, and mine are from Africa. We look different, our families do things in different ways, and sometimes even think differently. But that's never stopped us from being friends. In fact, our differences make our friendship better. They help us learn new things, try new experiences, and see the world from a different point of view. My friendship with Alyssa has taught me that good friends don't have to be the same. They just have to respect each other. And I think that's one of the most important parts of any friendship. So whether it's holding hands on a field trip, dancing side by side at a birthday party, or having hours-long conversations, Alyssa and I prove that being different doesn't mean you can't be close. Sometimes it makes the bond even stronger. Why friends matter? Life is just better with friends, don't you agree? Friends make the good times great and the not so good times a little easier to get through. When I have a friend around, everything feels lighter. Laughter comes quicker, games are more fun, and even boring things like waiting in line or cleaning up don't feel that bad. Friendships aren't just about fun though, they help us grow too. With friends, you learn how to share, not just toys and snacks, but ideas and space and attention. You learn how to listen, how to speak up for yourself, and how to say sorry when you make a mistake. You figure out some of the things that make people feel happy or sad, and how to treat others with kindness, even if you're having a bad day. Being a good friend takes practice, and every friendship helps you get better at it. Friendships also help us feel like we belong. When I'm with my friends, I feel seen and understood. I feel safe to be my true, goofy, talkative, sometimes too honest self. When I see my friends being their true selves, I feel good because that means they know I've got their back too. Sometimes friendships change. People grow, people move. People fall out and sometimes make up again. That's all part of learning what friendship is really about. Respect, forgiveness, and growing together or apart with love. So yeah, I think friends are super important. They make us feel less alone, teach us how to care, and remind us every day that we don't have to do life all by ourselves. I think that's something every child needs to know. That's all I'll be reading right now. And if you want to find this book, you can go to Bougainvillea Bookshop or order on Amazon. Before I go, let's do a quick recap. Reading is important and books are windows to the world. Children are capable of great things and should be encouraged to dream and use their voices. If I could write and publish books, so can you, if you want to. Dream, believe, and you will achieve. Remember, readers are leaders. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about my journey as an author. If you'd like to keep up with the Chronicles of Corinne on social media, I also have a few of my books if you'd like to check them out. Thank you. And since you've been such a good audience, you are the first people to see some new releases that will be coming out in 2026. Chronicles of Corinne, Don't Shut We Up, which is about my debut at the Junior Calypso competition, and Chronicles of Corinne, A Night with the Soca King, which is when I went to Trinidad and I performed with Machel Montano.
So my fun fact for Corinne is when children are read to before the age of 5 years old, their vocabulary exposure increases dramatically by millions of words. A child who is read to does not just gain words, they gained wells. Thank you, Corinne. Second fun fact, reading extends life. A Yale University study 2016 found that people who read books regularly live nearly 2 years longer than non-readers, an extra 2 years. Apparently, books are not just food for the soul, they are medicine for the body. Dr. Milton Whitaker was born in Newton Ground, St. Kitts, and received his early education at the Sandy Point Boys School, Sandy Point Secondary School, and the St. Kitts Nevis Grammar Schools. He earned a BS with distinction and an MSc in chemistry from the University of Calgary in Canada, and later completed his MED and PhD in science education at the University of Western Ontario. Dr. Whitaker devoted over 3 decades to science education, serving as teacher, head of science education, tutor, and lecturer at the Sandy Point High School and the St. Kitts Nevis Teachers College. He also held national leadership roles as Director of the Bureau of Standards and the Director of Research at the St. Kitts Biomedical Research Foundation, where he contributed to drug development and Parkinson's disease research. A recipient of the 2014 National Honors Award with the Star of Merit, he is the author of Medicinal Plants of St. Kitts and Nevis, and remains active in civic and professional service. Let us welcome warmly Dr. Milton Whitaker.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very hard act to follow, Miss Clark. I'm honored to have been invited to participate in this book forum. But my other words, it all started here, almost 51 years ago on this compound, when I came to work at the Teachers College. My interest in plants was a secondary. I happened to have assigned a project to my science students on medicinal plants. And two of them stand out in my mind, Anita Martin of St. Peter's and the late Anthony Blake of Nevis. That resulted in a pamphlet. I would call it a pamphlet because this is what it looks like. Medicinal Plants of St. Kitts and Nevis, Part 1. Began the journey, 65 pages. This particular copy, I suppose one would say it's museum piece because it's upside down. Then added to that, my journey took me to medicinal plants of St. Kitts and Nevis, Part 2, 120 plants, all with line drawings, which sometimes are very hard to recognize and identify. But the information, I suppose, in a sense, was there. And then we had the wonderful idea that we could enhance the publications by getting color photographs. And I'm looking at one of my accomplices in crime, who is sitting at the back, who also happened to be a college student, Mrs. Mavis Matthew. She was able to accompany me on the many hikes that we took to look at the plants, identify them, and take photographs, and also participated in the interviews. Well, interviewing persons was, in a sense, quite a task, because what we actually was assigned certain persons to various sections of the island, got the information, and then collated it, and then put it into, well, I suppose you have to write it out before you go into word processing. And I don't think anybody is here who has actually used a floppy disk. Or some people? Okay. Well, right on this compound, I happened, because it was the old hospital compound, there was a drug unit under Mr. Robert Bowie. And the now choice, the person who worked there, was Miss Morton of Celebrated Pharmacy in Bastille. And they, in a sense, inducted me into using the floppy disk and also computer service. And also, so my word processing actually began there. There was also a gentleman, I don't think he's here, but he has remained a very helpful assistant in producing these books, because he ended up doing some line drawings, looking at the plant and doing some line drawings. And the story behind that is that while he was sitting in the drug office one day, I saw him drawing naked people. And so I said, if you can draw naked people, you can draw plants. And so he was inducted into that. So many of the plants, in a sense, he ended up drawing them. But getting back to the color versions, part one, one of my sons had the inspiration when I was asking about names for books and so on. He suggested that I use plants around us. And so we have, in a sense, adopted that particular pattern, both in part one and part two, with color photographs, which I think enhance our message and our journey. So in 1997, we had medicinal plants of St. Kitts, part two. And then some of our, if you call it residents, can be sometimes very helpful in their patronage. And there was a millionaire from Mexico called Mr. Alan Cortez, who in a sense embraced the work done by Mrs. Matthew, myself, and other cohorts. And he sponsored this particular heavy book here, which, don't judge a book by its cover. It has a color cover, but a black inside with all sorts of line drawings. So we actually went back to that. But the good thing about this particular book is that we were able to put together a section on ailments and uses. So if you, for example, if you wanted to look at plants for flu, you would go to that particular appendix and see all the plants that are used for flu. If you wanted to use something for plants or food plants, you would actually do a similar thing. So this was, in a sense, the enhancement in this particular edition. The third book in this series, Plants Around Us Part 2, is in publication. And I am proud to say that one of my students, I think most of you would know him, Mr. Gregory Mawson, who did IT and stuff like that. He, in a sense, is my present formator, because the only computer science thing that I learned when I was at university was COBOL, if you want, a very, very old kind of thing to do. I didn't really learn any word processing, but I was able to slave through most of the information, and all the information, I'm a little proud to say this, that in these books, I actually sat down, well, sometimes you did more than sitting, and put the word processing into vogue, but you have to get it formatted, and here's where people like Mr. Mawson comes in, and also the former formatter, Mr. Morris of St. Paul's. The journey involved a lot of, well, financial, well, funding, and here's where the Heritage Society, in a sense, led me to funding from UNDP, GEF, and also our local SIDF. Unfortunately, part 3 is only 124 plants, but it took a lot in terms of going to Kittition Hill religiously, especially on weekends, to take photographs. And one of the downside, in a sense, about the Kittition Hill is that the two nurseries, there was one for food and one for non-food, ornamentals and just other things. Some of them are still in pots, including the celebrated Ceylon cinnamon. And I think all of you inside here would have heard of cinnamon. But that particular one is the one that is out front, not the common one you found in supermarkets. But plants like those are there, and I was able to, with the help of one of the workers, well, two of the workers, Mr. Lake, now deceased, and a Jamaican guy who came to St. Kitts to work, Mr. Dawson, who assisted me tremendously in taking the photographs of these plants. Sometimes you used to have to do some climbing, and certainly from my physique, you would think I would climb, but that's in a sense an adventure. I have now parted with the hiking at my age and stage. As I said, it's 51 years ago I was here as a lecturer, so in a sense, I would have moved on. But I wish to cite certain persons before I wrap up. In information gathering, I mentioned Mrs. Matthew Bedford, Mr. Nigel Carty Wilkes, and the Dean of Teacher Education. She came up to me while I was sitting there, and I reminded her that her mother was quite helpful in the information given to us for our books. We spoke to many farmers. One comes to mind is Mr. Challenger out of Old Road, who was very helpful. And some of these plants can have entertaining names. And when some of you look at the color books, you would have noticed a plant there called Jackass Bush. Very entertaining name. And some of the plants that we have used for flu and colds are like horse rub dung, cattle tongue, trumpet bush, and so on. I'm sure would come to your minds. I'm making a pitch here because in our efforts to catalog the plants, we found some rare ones. There's one particular one that grew outside the Union Place there, and I actually drew it to the attention of the people who, to whom I thought it would matter, but the tree is no longer there. There is also one at the St. Thomas, in the area of the cemetery, but behind the church, which the hurricane blew down some time ago. It was able to catch itself, but it's actually the only one of its kind that we have found on St. Kitts and Nevis. I believe that it was brought here by maybe someone of the churchmen. And in that regard, we also have a plant, when you turn the corner by the Methodist Church in St. Paul's on the right-hand side, there is a plant there called an ear plant. That, again, is a rarity, and I would like to see it not only labeled, but cared for posterity. I have a few plants here from part 3 that I bought instead of using a slide. And this particular one, I suppose you can examine it if you're not allergic to plants at some point while you're here. And it's actually called an earring plant. First, it comes out as earrings, and then it comes out into this wonderful version of a fruit and flower. Then we have this other one called a zebra plant, or golden vein plant. And incidentally, these were found originally at Kittishan Hill. And then this particular one, not a Kittishan Hill plant, but in the part 3. And there's a story, in a sense, behind this. This plant was given to us. When I say us, meaning me and my wife, Maureen Whittaker, by a student, an ex-student of this college called Brian Farrell, DJ Benji. It looks like an elder, but we keep this plant as a reminder of posterity of his life. Sure, he's short in life. Then this is another one, minus the flower, called Q-tip, because it looks exactly like a Q-tip. And one of the characteristics you notice, it has two colors, green on one side and magenta on the other side. And this is also one of the plants. I suppose I call it a prayer plant because it adopts a prayerful pose at some point during the day by lying down flat. Again, two colors. I like to acknowledge not only family, but other people like mentors. And one of the books was actually dedicated to a gentleman who actually lectured here over 50-something years ago, along with the celebrated Dorothy Martin, who I think introduced the name of a tree that grew here called the banyan tree. It's one of those big trees under which you could shelter. And I've also dedicated the book to my mother, Clemmy Whittaker, my wife, Maureen Whittaker, my sister, Esther Taylor. And this, in a sense, keeps their memory alive. I will end my description of my plant journey by again thanking you for being here. And the books, in a sense, would be available. Parts 1 and 2 are available on Amazon. I will leave the samples here for Ms. Daniel use. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Pick up my clutter.
Fun fact number 3, Caribbean reading legacy. In the Caribbean, storytelling traditions existed long before printed books. Oral literature was our first library. This included Anansi stories, folklore, calypso, and even nicknames that we gave each other. We were readers before we were literate because we read rhyme, learned proverbs, recited from memory, and we understood that it was a source of our survival. Dr. Melissa James is a first-generation college graduate, entrepreneur, and real estate investor who retired at the age of 35 after building multiple streams of income. She began her career earning $45,000 as an office manager. Later, became a recruiter at Google, launched a successful recruiting firm, and built a $2 million real estate portfolio. Today, She helps professionals strategically leverage their skills to increase income, build wealth, and design careers aligned with financial freedom. Online, we warmly welcome Dr. Melissa James.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I have to give a big round of applause to Miss Anita Daniel for having me. It was so kind of her to think of me and to have me be a part of the Authors Forum. I'm learning a lot just sitting here on Zoom, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Miss Daniels, for having me. Well, just as you kind of heard a little bit about me, I come from a West Indian background. I was born here in Boston, Massachusetts. And really, my parents have migrated from Jamaica. That's where my mom's from. And my dad's from Nevis. And I know that for sure you're going to ask me, what part of Nevis is your dad from? So I'm going to tell you now so that you don't have to worry about it during my presentation. But my dad is from Brooklyn, and he came here and migrated here in the 1970s. And my parents worked 2 jobs each, taking care of 4 kids, and really worked hard to put food on the table so that we would have access to the best schools and live in the safest neighborhoods. And I was really grateful for that experience and that opportunity. But for me, I always wondered what it was like to come from a family where they grew up in the US. What was that like for them? And I would often go over to my friends' houses, and they would have these beautiful homes out in the suburbs that were beautiful mansions. And I always wondered, what did their parents do? And why did they have such a big house? So for me, I always got to know my friends. And like Corinne said earlier, your friends are so important. And she's right, because readers are leaders. And I loved reading with my friends. And as I was going through and getting to know other people in school, I later learned a little bit more about what their parents did for work. And as I learned, many of them were the children of doctors, lawyers, engineers, nurses. And for me, I was like, well, I don't like blood and I don't like math. So well, then what can I be? So of course, my parents were okay with me becoming a lawyer. They liked the idea of that. But really, I didn't know any other lawyers that looked like me and that were in that field. So I decided that I'd go to law school because it kind of sounded like the right thing to do, but I didn't necessarily know if it was the best thing for me to do. So my parents always supported me while I was an undergrad. I went to UMass Amherst for undergrad, and I studied journalism and legal studies. I was on my way to law school when I graduated in 2010 in the middle of a recession. And I remember calling law school graduates. Then LinkedIn had just came about. And I remember going on LinkedIn, wanting to connect with other law school graduates and asking them, hey, I know we're in a recession. I know you're looking for a job right now. How is it looking for a job? And I remember meeting with one gentleman, and he told me, I wish that I could return my degree in exchange for wiping out my student loans because no one will hire me because I'm overqualified. And I was just stunned that that could even be a possibility, that the job market could impact my ability to get hired and my ability to pay back student loans. So I was always super curious about what can I do to be successful? How can I get to financial freedom as quickly as possible? Because if you can't find a job doing what you love to do, then what are you going to do? So I had a really hard decision to make to decide whether or not I was off to law school or if I was going to wait and see if the market would get a little bit better and then decide my next best step. So when I graduated, I was super excited and very happy, but I really didn't know what my next step would be. So I had decided that I would volunteer instead. I would volunteer doing free legal services focused on housing and immigration for low-income families. So I said, let me at least get some experience, even if it's just volunteering, and we'll see what happens in the job market. And as I waited, I foolishly thought, if you wait long enough, give it 1 year, the job market should be right back. And unfortunately, that's actually not how the world works. It can take years for us to come out of a recession and to fully recover. And I remember volunteering at my job site, and I was also working next to students who had just graduated from law school that were also volunteering and trying to figure out their next best step. So they were volunteering again, wanting to gain more work experience, but wasn't sure what to do in the meantime as they were waiting for jobs so that they could actually move forward. And really through that experience, it taught me so much about how important it is to pay attention to the market as you're making your decisions for your career. And that's why I call it like, when you're going to get a real career, because sometimes real world actions impact our decision making. The market impacts our ability to find a job. And I think that's so important for us as we design careers that we love, that we pay attention to the signals that the market gives us. So ultimately, I decided, well, I'll wait just 1 more year. I finished my volunteer program and I said, okay, well, what can I do next? I ended up reaching out to a recruiting firm. I showed them my background and resume, and they basically said to me like, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for an office manager role at a biotech company that was a spin out from MIT and Harvard. And I said to them, I don't know nothing about no business. I don't know anything about working in an office. Why would you want me to go and do this job? And they looked at my volunteer experience that I did while I was in college. They looked at the community groups that I was a part of. And I said, I think you'd be really good at it. Why don't you just go in and interview and tell them more about your experience and see how it goes? I went in and I talked about the things on my resume, how I volunteered. Oh, did someone say something? No? Okay. So I went in and I explained to them more about my volunteer experience that I had done. And don't you know, by the time I got out of the interview and walked to my car in the parking lot, the hiring manager called me back and said, you're hired, you start on Monday. And I was like, what the heck? How is this possible? They loved hearing more about my commitment to my community, how I volunteered and gave back, the skills that I learned, even when I didn't know what the right answer was. And I had no idea that that would impact how I would design my career moving forward. I will never forget my first day when my manager handed me an unlimited American Express credit card and told me, don't burn down the place. And I said, what? I'm 21 years old. Why would you trust me with this much authority? And he said, well, I can always find all the transactions on the credit card. Don't worry. And I know where to find you, which I thought was very sweet and very kind. But he really ended up being one of the best managers I ever could have asked for. Little did I know that being an office manager, I would learn more about finance. I would learn more about operations. I would learn more about recruiting. I would learn more about HR. Those were all the things to be a successful business owner. And I felt like I was in the school of hard knocks every day. There was so much passion and energy and drive that I had towards my work. And I was so excited to be doing it. But I also was super overwhelmed because we were just a 7-person team. I was employee number 7. I was the youngest person on the team. And I had people, my senior, other PhDs that were scientists, that were doctors in their field, that were big people with big titles and so different than me. So being able to work at this startup, I had no idea that I would be going through leadership boot camp every single day. And really from that, I learned how to present to the board. I learned how to present to leadership, all when I was 21 years old. And I never forget thinking, well, wow, I'm so lucky to have this experience. I have, as when I'm recruiting, I have job opportunities that pay six figures, over $100,000. Boy, I wish I could give these job opportunities to people that look like me. But what I would often find is that by the time I would meet with other candidates, their resume didn't align to what we were looking for. Their background and experience and what they talked about in the interview wasn't aligning to what we were looking for. So I started volunteering again. This time I partnered with the Young Black Women's Society, and I would host resume workshops. I would host interview workshops, all teaching them how to prepare for resumes. What are the thoughts that go through the hiring manager's mind? What are they saying when they review it so that they could be prepared to answer questions when they get called for the interview? Little did I know that that volunteering, yet again, would be something that would be valuable to my career. I had decided that I loved recruiting and hiring. It was something that I fell in love with. I love talking to people about their career. I love being able to help them find new jobs that are going to align with their passion. And one day, I kid you not, I was closing the books, doing the end of month accounting for the business. And I randomly got a phone call from California. And I was like, this can't be for me. This is strange. I don't know this number. This must be spam. And I remember thinking, well, my brother just moved out to California. Maybe it's him. But do I really feel like talking to my brother right now? I'm at work. I'll call him later. And then for some reason, the phone just kept flashing, California, California. And I finally said, you know what? Let me just answer it just in case. It might be an emergency. So I answer the phone, and this woman says she's calling me from Google. And she wanted to see if she could speak with Melissa James. And I said, what? Are you sure this is Google? Google what? And she said, no, this is really Google, like google.com. And I said, absolutely not. I don't believe it. What are you calling about? She was like, well, I saw your resume on LinkedIn. I have a job opportunity that I think that you might like. It was volunteering and working with, not volunteering, excuse me, this is a paid opportunity. It wasn't volunteering, but it was an opportunity to join Google's team as a recruiter. I'm working with students from historically Black colleges and universities and teaching them how to write their resume, how to interview, and how to get a job at Google. I said, well, I know how to do that. I'd love to learn more. And I remember going home that day so excited, telling my sisters, oh my God, I just got a phone call from Google. I said, well, I'm happy to send in my information. I'm happy to send over my resume. When do you need it by? She said, tomorrow morning. Can you send it to me at 9 a.m.? It was already 7 p.m. and I was at the office. So that means I had to run home, get on my computer, call my sisters to help me. I updated my resume, read over the job description, and surely by 9 a.m., my eyes extremely tired, bags under my eyes, I submitted my resume. And don't you know, I got that job. It was, again, opportunities like that kind of came out of nowhere just because I was volunteering, following my passion, following my curiosity, and giving back to my community. Those were the things that were starting to impact my career and taking me to the next level. Working at Google was my dream job. Can you imagine what it would be like working at a big Fortune 500 company? My boss was so happy for me at my previous company. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. My parents were like, I can retire. She's good. Everything's fine. Everyone was so excited. And I kid you not, I walked into Google super nervous, feeling a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, how did I get hired? How did this happen for me? But here I am. They hired me for some reason. I'm going to give it my best shot. And I kid you not, at the end of my day, I sat down with my manager and we were chatting and we were talking about how the day went and what I learned. And I said, well, the day went really good, but oh my God. And he was like, are you okay? And I was like, are you all right? Tell me why. I threw up twice, 2 times during my first day at Google while I was having a conversation with my manager. I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, I lost my job. They're never going to want me to come back. Like, this is so scary. But I had no idea that anxiety can manifest itself in different ways. I was so anxious about being in that environment, being around so many smart and brilliant people, that out of nowhere, my body was having a totally different reaction. So things like that are moments that influenced my career, but I had to remind myself of the moments where my parents had worked so hard for me to have opportunities like this. The moments where a little job changed my parents' lives. A little job was the difference between having food on the table and us being able to have dinner. So for me, I always thought about the cost, because they sacrificed a lot for me. So I spent much of my time learning more about how to be a great recruiter at Google, partnering with different colleges and universities. And really from that experience, that's where I started to see what are some of the challenges and opportunities when it comes to recruiting diverse talent when you're working at a Fortune 500 company. And I remember saying to my manager, well, we have a hiring number that we want to hit. We're not going to hit that number unless we make some changes to accelerate this process. So I walked him through. I said, well, I think we should do it differently. I think I need to be more present. I think I need to be on site. I think we should present differently than where we are now, where I'm remote. And he said, well, let's present it to our manager's manager. And I remember thinking, okay, yeah, sure. I'm happy to present. No problem. Like, I can walk them through what we've got going on, what I think the plan is. It's no big deal. And I remember presenting my plan to them. And I remember the manager saying to me, Melissa, I really like all the ideas that you have. Do me a favor. Can you put it in a presentation and I'll present it for you and I'll bring it up the chain? And I just remember thinking to myself, well, why can't I present it myself? I'm the one that connected with these people. I know what's going on with my students and how they're responding. I'd like to present it to myself because at my first company, I was presenting to the leadership team. I presented to the board. Why would you be any different than me? And I'll never forget that day, just wondering why I couldn't do it. And she's like, well, that's not the way it works here. And I said, well, how does it work? If I were to move forward with this presentation, would I be able to lead this team? She said, oh, no, you just got started here. That's not how it works. You have to wait probably about 5 to 6 years. You have to see if you get funding for it. I'm not really sure, but that's not the way things work here. And I just remember being so frustrated by that. Because when I worked at my other company, I could come up with ideas. He would give me budget. I would just say, okay, I want to do this. This is how I want to go about it. You tell me, yes, we have funding, or no, we don't have funding. If we don't have funding, we're going to go fundraise for funding. And he showed me all of those things. So I said, that's strange. And I remember going to my desk and I remember saying, well, I could make this presentation for them, or I could see if this really sits well with me, because something is not sitting well. And I remember going to my computer and seeing that on Yahoo News, it was Microsoft, it was Facebook, it was Meta, all releasing their diversity data, showing that they were all struggling with diversity recruitment. And I remember thinking, well, if Google's got all the money in the world, what in the world is happening at all these other companies? And that's really the moment on when I decided that, well, maybe I have something that I could teach to other companies. And I said, well, I'll still sleep on it. I'll still make the presentation and I'll think about it. I had one more candidate phone call before I went home just to check in and see how the interview went that she had that day. And I remember calling her, and she was a student from an HBCU. She had a 4.0 GPA. And I said to her, how did your interview go? And she was crying on the other side of the phone. I said, what's wrong? She said, Melissa, I had no idea even how to start this coding challenge. I had no idea what to do. And that guy just sat there just looking at me. I bombed my interview. I blew my chance. I know I let you down and I'm so sorry. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you felt this way. Is that what happened? You never let me down. You tried your best. It's all that matters. And I remember getting off the phone with her and saying, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to help people get good jobs. I signed up to help people feel good and confident when they go through the interview process. I want to get to the bottom of this. What happened in that interview? What took place there? And that's when you start to see the red tape. Recruiters don't talk to engineers about how it went. Engineers put feedback inside the system when we wait for the system to get updated. Completely different approach. And I remember feeling like I didn't sign up for this. I believe there's a better way that we can go about recruiting. There's a better approach to this. And that's when I decided that I would start my company, The Tech Connection, where we connect diverse talent to tech companies by giving them interview training, giving them a full rubric on how to go about getting hired at these companies. And for me, that was life-changing. Being bold enough to follow my dreams, to follow my curiosity, were all things that I was willing to take as a risk in my career. And through those experiences, I learned so much. I grew a successful business. I partnered with multiple Fortune 500 companies, got multiple candidates hired, and even co-founded a nonprofit with a Harvard Business School professor where we would help students from community colleges also get hired at Fortune 500 companies because they too deserve the opportunity to have a high-tech internship that could impact their career. So for me, I'm the kind of person where if I see a challenge or I see an opportunity, I believe that you should follow that curiosity to design a career that you love that makes you happy. And each time that I took to follow my curiosity, to be able to be of service to my community, it paid off in dividends. I was able to expand my reach, expand the work that I've done. And I remember wanting to share all that I had learned through this journey, where it was about creating opportunities for yourself when sometimes the job market isn't giving you what you need. Going through and figuring out how to show up and be visible so that people know your name. And then lastly, just setting your own pace on like, how long are you willing to wait? Because I wasn't willing to wait. I wanted answers for my candidates now because I know they deserved it. They deserved a better opportunity. And that's why I think it's so important to design a career that you love, follow that curiosity, and really know yourself, know your values as you go through the process. So for me, that's something that I cared a lot about. I wrote this book, When Are You Going to Get a Real Career? A Guide to Designing a Career That You Love, mainly because I wanted people that looked like me to hear stories of young professionals that were also going through the same thing. How do you reinvent yourself to meet the market and to create the life that you've always imagined? So that's a little bit more about who I am and what I've done. And really through that experience, I learned how valuable it is to be able to find a good job. Having a good job can change your life. Making six figures can change your life. And being able to see people go from being an intern making $25,000 to getting a full-time offer from these tech companies making well over six figures, getting stock options, being able to buy their first home is the most powerful work I've ever been able to do. It is my calling in life. It is the Lord's work. And I am grateful to be called to do this work. And it's something that I'm deeply passionate about. So as I later decided in my career I wanted to invest in multifamily real estate, I provide low-income housing to families and women and children that are working hard and wanting to succeed, because that's something that I needed and that my family needed in order for us to be successful. So wanting to walk and live in my values, it's a reminder for me of like knowing where I came from, knowing how I got started, and also wanting to pay it back to my community. Well, thank you all so much for having me. And I'm happy to stick around for some questions afterwards, but thank you so much for being here.
Fun fact. Fun fact number 4. Prison reading programs reduce recidivism. Studies from the United States Department of Justice show that inmates who participate in educational and reading programs are significantly less likely to reoffend. Books do what bars cannot do. That is, they reform minds. Mr. Cecil Hamilton was born in Keon, St. Kitts, on the 3rd of February, 1955. From an early age, he developed a deep appreciation for literature, having been introduced to reading in childhood. By the age of 8, his love for books inspired dreams of becoming a writer. During his primary and secondary school years, he nurtured his passion through essay writing and poetry, winning a national essay competition and publishing poems in national commemorative festival magazines. Beyond literature, Mr. Hamilton built a diverse professional life. His early career included roles as postman, primary school teacher, educational broadcaster, national service participant, and middle manager in manufacturing. On the 16th of August, 1984, he began what would become a distinguished career in Social Security in St. Kitts and Nevis. He served as an inspector in the Compliance Department and later managed both the Compliance and Public Relations Department. His tenure reflected a strong commitment to public service and effective communication of Social Security legislation. He demitted office in February 2017. Mr. Hamilton is also widely recognized for his contributions in cultural life in St. Kitts and Nevis. Applying his poetic talent to calypso, he achieved national prominence, winning the Road March title in 1974 and the prestigious National Carnival Calypso King title in 1983. He earned several podium finishes throughout his career before stepping away from competition in 1994. His literary and cultural contributions continue to reflect a lifelong dedication to communication, creativity, and public service. Let us welcome Mr. Cecil Hamilton.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, good evening. Good evening, Melissa. First of all, I want to say thanks to Mrs. Daniel for inviting me to participate in the Authors Forum. She has always invited me to attend, and I have really been blessed to have been at the receiving end of the interventions that were made by the different authors over the years. And so I feel now very privileged to have been asked to be participating at this level as one of the presenters for this year, the 6th edition of the Authors Forum. So thank you very much, Mrs. Daniel. And also I want to just mention that my reasons for being here has to do with my involvement more so in social security practice, as it were, over a period of 30-something years. And as I mentioned in the book that is being discussed today, Social Security, My Topical Reflections, Essays and Issues, Social Security had become for me more a labor of love than a labor of livelihood, because I really took it to heart in terms of what I did and what I was able to share with the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and perhaps beyond, because I've had the opportunity to travel on workshops within the region and in Canada and Mexico as well. So the book that I'm talking about, though, is really something that came out of my realization that in St. Kitts and Nevis, and to some extent in the wider Caribbean, there's not much literature available by Social Security practitioners. And particularly for our case of St. Kitts and Nevis, I felt that if I had the opportunity to make a contribution to that type of discourse, that I should do that, because I was aware that there might have been just a few bits of writing on Social Security issues in the past by persons like the first Minister of Social Security, Esmond St. John Payne, and a few others who would have written exposés on the subject matter of Social Security. And so when I got the opportunity to be in a situation to write a number of essays on some particular topics, I thought, okay, so this is my opportunity to make my contribution to literature in that regard. Now, the book that I'm talking about is Social Security, My Topical Reflections, Essays, and Issues. Yes. So I want to take the opportunity to just briefly explain what the book is about. As you will see, it's set up in three parts: part 1, part 2, and part 3. And the first part is really a selection that consists of 4 essays intending to provide a measure of analytical reflection on the St. Kitts and Nevis experience in Social Security. And in short, the following topics are presented. Chapter 1 saying Social Security in St. Kitts and Nevis, giving an overview, essentially, of how we in St. Kitts have been building a secure foundation of our Social Security system in St. Kitts and Nevis. Chapter 2 is an essay on changing face and facing change. It's really an analysis of how St. Kitts and Nevis has dealt with the change culture in terms of how we have evolved over the years in St. Kitts and Nevis Social Security. Chapter 3 is a question that dealt with a survey that I had done to determine the question of whether or not state pensions can suffice for persons who are retiring. And in due course, you will, if you read the book, you will learn that really and truly the answer is that state pension by itself does not suffice. And that is the reason why there would be an advocacy for having additional sources of income in retirement, including possibly a private pension fund different from Social Security, so that by the time you put the two of them together, you're basically having an income similar to when you were actively working. And chapter 4 in that first section is an essay that really speaks about how persons who are in practicing Social Security delivery, people who are working for Social Security, how they can in fact work on their Social Security systems in a way that would essentially create a brighter future for everyone because of the value of the very product of Social Security. Part 2, chapters 5 to 7. 3 essays in this section are more generally in relation to Social Security issues being grappled with across the wider OECS and CARICOM region, because the opportunity that I had was to go through a series of courses with Social Security practitioners from around the Caribbean region. And so we discussed at length. We had very, very insightful presenters who would have given us a lot of food for thought. And so these essays really speak to that wider view in terms of OECS and CARICOM and not just St. Kitts and Nevis. The chapters, the sustainability of Social Security organizations. This is a question that is really at the heart of the discussion, even today. How sustainable can these Social Security systems be? In other words, will they flop one day, or can they be sustained in a way that they can serve future generations? Chapter 6 is a question which really was one of the darlings of our deliberation, because there was this talk that governments across the region appeared to have a view that Social Security can be utilized as almost like an ex-treasury for the government. And so the question of whether or not we should zip the purse or allow governments to just do what they want with the purse. And so that essay deals with that issue. Chapter 7 is a question about reciprocity. Now, because we have reciprocal agreements, or a reciprocal agreement that holds true between CARICOM countries and to another extent between CARICOM countries, between OECS countries, there was a thought that there should be some way to utilize technology to facilitate reciprocity. And this essay deals with that particular issue of how we can apply technology, how we can use computers and the internet and so on to have systems whereby the Social Security systems across the region can interact and communicate with each other, so that when persons claim in whatever territory, some of the difficulties would be lessened if they can access and share information across the World Wide Web in a secure environment, of course, so that there would not be the need for this lot of paper. You know, we are always talking about a paperless society, and reciprocity could be facilitated by the use of technology, and that is what that essay speaks about. Now, chapter 3, or part 3, I beg your pardon. Now, this is really the part that excites me most, because chapter 8 deals with several issues in keeping with my own observations about the status of relevant matters as described in those issues, which are part of the Social Security landscape of St. Kitts and Nevis. So I brought it home. The text represents my considered views, having reflected on such aspects as social justice, reasonableness, truth, and in one case, an apparent lacuna of knowledge, interpretation, and implementation of the applicable law. In terms of understanding what this is about, I would urge persons who have access to this book to read this particular essay, because this particular section, section 3, or part 3, because I don't know if I could say that some of the ideas are controversial. I wouldn't say that they are controversial, but they are what I would term innovations that we can employ. Now, to date, I have not been successful in getting the local establishment to latch on to some of these things. I can tell you this much, that I did present a copy of the book and highlighted the issues outlined in part 3, chapter 8, to at least 2 ministers of Social Security in the past, both of whom have indicated to me that at least one of the issues, which I think is very, very crucial, can be added to the list of things that are done in the upcoming Social Security reforms. I've been assured of that by Minister Amri when he was Minister of Social Security, and by Minister Hamilton when he was Minister of Social Security. To date, I have not had the opportunity to interact directly with the current minister, but I did send him a copy of the book and highlighted the fact that chapter 8 has some issues that I would hope that the ministry can look at. So I'm hoping that in time I will be able to get confirmation from the current minister that some of them may be taken on board for the reforms. If I might just give a little tidbit about one of them, and that is the aspect of representation on the Social Security Board. Now, in the past, the board consisted of up to 8 members, but at a point in time, the numbers were increased from 8 to 12. Now, usually, Social Security representation is referred to as tripartite. You have government or public sector, employers, and insured persons. But up until 1996, insured persons was only employees. No self-employed person was covered up until 1996. So from 1996, self-employed persons came under the umbrella of Social Security. But even with the increased number of members on the board to 12, the opportunity has not yet been taken to ensure that there is prescribed representation of self-employed on the board. So currently you still have just the public sector or government, employers, and insured persons in the form of employees. But self-employeds, although they are now paying contributions, are not represented on the board. And I term that as taxation without representation. And that is just a tidbit of one of the issues raised in chapter 8 at part 3 of the book. So I would like to say in closing that I really and truly wanted to present this book as a gift, if you will, to students of today so that they can at least begin to involve themselves in the discussions about issues relating to Social Security by having an exposure to the essays in particular and even to the issues that are presented in chapter 8. And that is why I would have ensured when the book was published first that I would have made available copies to the local public libraries on St. Kitts and Nevis and to the college as well. And so even going forward, even as I am now contemplating possibly doing a second edition, which might include some other issues in chapter 8, I would like to hope that that this book is still of some value, and I commend it to all who would like to take an interest. Thank you very much.
Fun fact number 5. Frederick Douglass learned to read in the street. Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, secretly learned to read. He later wrote, and I quote, "Once you learn to read, you will be forever free," end quote. Reading was seen as dangerous because literacy meant power. Throughout history, oppressors have feared readers. Miss Jessica Byron, Dr. Jessica Byron, Professor Emerita Jessica Byron, is a retired professor of Caribbean International Relations and Diplomacy at the University of the West Indies. She served 23 years at the UWI Mona campus and then directed the Graduate Institute of International Relations at UWI St. Augustine for 6 years until her retirement. Currently, she is an honorary professor with the Salisis UWI Mona. She also has 67 publications ranging from book chapters and journal articles to edited book collections, technical reports, and book reviews. She will present a chapter of her book she authored on summits in the Caribbean community, a fundamental feature of regional governance. Let us welcome Dr. Jessica Byron.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. The good thing is that this is an article, it's not a book. So I will try to be brief. And I thought of doing this particular, of speaking to you about this particular article because St. Kitts recently hosted the CARICOM Summit. So I thought that maybe it would resonate a little bit more because of that recent event and all the various heads of government and the Secretary of State of the US, et cetera, and other distinguished guests who are here. So the particular piece of research that it's based on is actually a chapter in this book, which was published in 2016. It's called Summits and Regional Governance, the Americas in Comparative Perspective. It was a fun project by a number of researchers from various Latin American and North American and Caribbean countries, excuse me, and a few others, because I think we had a chapter on ASEAN and a chapter on the BRICS, summits in the BRICS world. And, well, we put our heads together, we did some research, and we came up with a collection of chapters analyzing the process of summitry in different parts of the world as an instrument of governance, of regional governance, because, well, it's a little bit more than, just pomp and show. Quite a lot of important decisions are taken at these meetings, and they actually serve as a sort of engine that drives implementation forward. Because if they meet again a year or 2 years later, they want to be able to report on results. So summitry is important in that way. So this chapter was actually done on Caribbean summitry. It's in a book that was published 10 years ago. And it was one of, there were all these comparative chapters from different parts of the Americas, and I think there were a few from outside of the Americas. ASEAN was one example. ASEAN is a regional grouping that, of course, consists of the Southeast Asian countries, Thailand and Malaysia, and so on. And I had the pleasure of working on CARICOM. And it was, you don't always enjoy things that you're researching, but this was actually fun to research. And among other things, it involved going through speeches and opinions of a number of past CARICOM leaders. And we had a set of characters. If ever you have read anything that Forbes Burnham has written, a man with very, very strong dogmatic opinions who never cared who he offended, or Eugenia Charles, equally outspoken and stubborn, or Errol Barrow. So I had a lot of fun researching this because some of it, not all, involved the exchanges and the debates and ultimately the way in which these leaders were able to arrive at some happy or not so happy conclusions that would have an impact on all our territories. So it was part of a wider study on the role of summits in regional governance in the Americas and a few other places, BRICS, the G7, and ASEAN. And it really looked at the process, the purposes, the evolution, the shortcomings, and the future of summitry as an instrument of governance, as an instrument of decision-making, and hopefully as an instrument of implementation. And it has, apart from the pomp and ceremony that we witnessed to some extent a couple of weeks ago, it can drive implementation, but often it fizzles out, and there's not much to show after all these major decisions have been made. Now, CARICOM is actually one of the better functioning examples of regional summits. In terms of its longevity, CARICOM celebrated its 50th anniversary this year. If you don't mind, I'm going to go and get my... Yes, this is much better. Yeah. CARICOM turned out to be one of the best functioning examples in the book in terms of its having regular meetings, very well prepared agendas, and longevity, but not entirely in terms of the results of all its initiatives. I'm sure that we can all think of very well heralded CARICOM initiatives that have sort of fizzled out. It should also be noted that unlike our recent summit, which was attended by all the governments and also the associate members, and why shouldn't they? It was the 50th anniversary of this organization's founding, so everybody would want to be at the table. But they were not always so well supported. In the late 70s, absenteeism was common. Eric Williams absented himself for 6 years from CARICOM summits. Eric Williams was one of the creators of the organization. And then he got fed up of it, pulled out his hearing aid, and just stopped going to meetings. But fortunately, it got back on track when he died. And after that, CARICOM resumed its vitality and was able to implement some of its initiatives. It should also be noted, and this is interesting, that CARICOM itself and the summit process were modeled on the Organization of African Unity. So that served as an early inspiration for us in the Caribbean. And the aim, of course, was to build closer relations, both politically and economically. And the summits, which started before CARICOM, actually led to the formation of CARIFTA and CARICOM. Now, Eric Williams launched these summits using the OAU as a model. Then he got disillusioned, and he boycotted CARICOM for several years. And the summit process was suspended for 6 years. It got back on track in the early 80s, and I attended the first one when they resumed in 1982 as a representative of St. Kitts and Nevis, a junior, very junior representative, but we did some hard work nonetheless. I seem to remember having to take a lot of minutes whenever there are women in meetings. You get asked to take minutes. Forbes Burnham and Eugenia Charles strongly supported the summits as tools for building regional unity. And the summit process became the final decision-making organ of CARICOM. Now, on the one hand, summits are important, but on the other hand, a summit is a very top-down tool of regional unity. And there's a lot more that our summits could do to involve the people of the region, to involve the people of the different territories where they're held, so that it's not just leaders passing us in their cars and going to meetings that, and there is little really reported on the substance and the content of the meetings, although it filters down in the end. So it's an interesting process, but it's very much a top-down tool of regional unity, and regions thrive and flourish because of much more than summits. Now, I mentioned in the article that, the chapter in this book on CARICOM summitry, I mentioned CARICOM's many leaders with strong characters and idiosyncratic personalities. You had Errol Barrow, you had Forbes Burnham, you had Eugenia Charles, and so on. All of these people influenced the style of regional summitry. There was Eric Williams, too. There was Mr. Byrd from Antigua. They all left their mark on the character of the organization and the way in which business was conducted during their presence there. Now, these days, a country chairs the region for 6 months. So right now, St. Kitts is chairing CARICOM, and at the end of 6 months, St. Kitts and our Prime Minister will hand over to whoever takes over from him. And you have now what is called the Bureau. The Bureau is made up of the past chair, the current chair, and the future chair. And they work together for a 6-month period to give continuity to the implementation of the deliberations and the decisions that each summit has produced. So the summits play a role in monitoring and trying to drive forward whatever happens to be the agenda of our CARICOM countries. The economic agenda, or the social agenda, or the political agenda. the results can be positive and sometimes they're underwhelming. And often, well, now I think there is, unfortunately, our engagement with civil society has declined. There was a period in the 1990s when, the 1990s, when there was a push by CARICOM governments and leaders to have meetings with civil society organizations at the end of each summit and take questions and record their suggestions. And there was much more public involvement in the summitry process than there is at present. Unfortunately, that has declined, and it's a pity, because I think that breathed more life into CARICOM and into our population's understanding and vision of what regional cooperation can be. Summits have a role in monitoring and in trying to drive forward whatever the regional agenda tends to be. For quite a few years, it was an economic agenda. I think now they are probably searching for a new agenda, which is likely to be more social and political in nature. Summits also are a forum for the Caribbean region to engage with major international partners. So usually you will see a representative from the United States, very much on display this time. What you would also see a representative, an European Union representative, a little less so this time. You would see other important partners. I'm sure that we would have had at least one representative from the African Union. Yes. So it's also a place where the region, it's an occasion for the region to engage in dialogue with its major political and economic partners. Now, each chair, the chair is the country that hosts the meeting, and that country will chair CARICOM for the next 6 months and then hand over to another country. And one of the mechanisms of governance is that at all times in CARICOM, you have a bureau which is made up of the past chair, the past country chair, the current country chair, and the country that is slated to take over after the current one. So you have the past, present, and future chairs to give continuity to the deliberations of the heads of government and to the implementation of the decisions. Now, our summits in CARICOM also have a role in monitoring and in trying to drive forward the agendas. They're not always successful in that. The economic agenda has lagged woefully. They used to have more profound engagement with civil society, and I hope very much that governments will see fit to go back to that, because in no country can governments drive forward a national agenda by themselves. They need the full cooperation and involvement of both private sector and civil society, society in general. Now, often as well, as we notice this time, the summit becomes a forum for dialogue. This year, what was very much on display was dialogue with the United States, but also with other countries, with African countries, with European countries, with countries in Asia with whom we do more and more and more business. I am not, no, well, China would not have been at a summit in St. Kitts, but the major trade partner of Latin America and the Caribbean is indeed China. And usually you find that China plays a very prominent role in many of the summits, not just our summits, but summits that are held with Latin American countries. So these occasions are mechanisms for these sorts of policy-oriented dialogues. So our Prime Minister and St. Kitts will be chairing the CARICOM Bureau for the next 6 months, and then it will be the chairing and the steering will be handed over to another country. So in addition to this role of the summits in monitoring and in trying to drive forward the political and economic agendas of the region, and what didn't happen this time, which was more engagement with civil society, unfortunately that has lapsed a bit over the last few summits. It was a forum for US and CARICOM security and economic cooperation. And there would have been, other important partners present also from Europe, from the African Union and other places with whom there would have been dialogue also. CARICOM summits in the past have produced some very interesting results for us. The CDEMA, our disaster preparedness and collective response mechanism, that came out, that was created based on a proposal that was made at a CARICOM summit. Regional political mediation efforts, thank you, such as in St. Kitts and Nevis in 1996, when the specter of secession was rearing its head. Thank you very much, Mrs. Daniel. And in 1998, when Guyanese electoral disputes were flaring, the CARICOM summit spent a long time in trying to put those fires out. Throughout the 1990s, the governance of Haiti occupied CARICOM summits, and it still does to this day. That is perhaps the most intractable governance issue that CARICOM has ever faced. So my chapter in Summits and Regional Governance, it dealt with all those issues and, of course, the mechanics and the process of these summits. And it concluded that while summit activity, which is a manifestation of regional unity in principle, while summit activity increased, so too did CARICOM states' foreign and domestic policies continue to diverge. So on the one hand, we're good at meeting and agreeing to do things together, but you have a lot of unilateralism that continues to take its course nonetheless. But it might have been much worse if we did not have these summits. We might have even more unilateralism. So I must say, though, that the OECS is an exception to this more general rule, probably because the OECS has much closer governance. 7 countries, but we combine our resources for so many different processes And we have no choice in many cases because we have limited capabilities individually. So the OECS is probably the best example of regional unity in taking and implementing decisions. It's a happy exception. But in the chapter that I wrote on summitry, which was written 10 years ago, but a lot of it is still relevant, I concluded that CARICOM and its summits are great survivors. Thank you very much. Remain as our great survivors.
All right, so at this point, we will have the audience engage with our authors. So I would welcome our authors to take a seat at the table up front, please. Ms. Corinne Clark, Dr. Milton Whitaker, Mr. Chessel Hamilton, and Dr. Jessica Byron. We would have Dr. Melissa James joining us online. We have a mic at the back. Okay. Who would like to? Dr. Gill?
Good evening to all.
Good evening.
My question is for Dr. Melissa James. You spoke about your experience at Google. So, and well, it's up to you if you mind answering or not. I have my suspicion about some of the experiences you mentioned, because I've noticed there's been a trend recently which accelerated after the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, where a lot of firms in USA, Canada, Europe will say, oh, we want to increase diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI, etc. And they would, but there's one thing in saying that, but the question is how genuine they are about it. So in the case of what you experience at Google, where you would assist people in creating these resumes, but then the results were not what they should have been. Was it a case that they hired you to give the impression of increasing diversity, and on the surface they claimed they wanted to bring in more black and brown employees into the firm? So it was just basically to create an appearance. So you create these proposals for them, and you hand it in to them, and maybe this disappears into a corner, and then they can take a box and say, we did this. So was that the case, if you don't mind answering? Or do you suspect that might have been the case?
You know, that's a really good question. And you never know which is which. That's an honest answer, right? I think that in my experience, did Google have the right intention? Absolutely. I think they had dedicated resources. They wanted to reach out. Some companies don't have that. Some companies don't actually do that. Some companies actually ignore talking about diversity. Some companies don't invest in diversity recruiting at all. So the simple act of them aligning their budget to their value does say something. Now, the thing about working at large scale companies is that there are hundreds of employees that are there, thousands of employees that are there. Google has over 100,000 employees. Each person has their own individual unconscious bias and conscious bias when it comes to recruitment and hiring. I went to UMass Amherst, and I love other UMass Amherst graduates, is one that is a bias that people can have versus, people say, well, I know that zip code. oh, that means they're from this area of town. And I know this area of town and I don't hire from that area of town. So there's different types of biases that people can have. And I think that oftentimes when companies start a diversity recruitment effort, the challenging part can be the managers. Because although you can tell them what to do and give them, the right instruction, people make their own personal choices. And when they make their own personal choices, sometimes unconscious bias or conscious bias can show up. So from my perspective, I think, and I would love to believe that everyone's on their own learner journey and trying to figure out where they stand when it comes to diversity. So I think everybody has a different perspective when they go through it, but I do think that like when companies do dedicate budget, resources, and teams to it, at least they're trying. Would I love to see them make more hires? Absolutely. Do I believe that bias in hiring affects candidate selection? Absolutely. And these are some of the real world challenges and opportunities that we have to be brave enough to have courageous conversations. So I hope that answers your question. And thank you so much for asking. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Hensley Daniel?
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening. First of all, I want to commend the 10-year-old author. I wish I was as brave. I wish I was as brave and good as you at age 10. At age 10, we were told that children like us were to be seen, not heard. And in some of our cases, it was both, neither seen nor heard. So, congratulations to you. 2 questions. First one to Social Security and then one to the summit. Mr. Hamilton, in the chapter 8, I have read several of the reports from Social Security. But I wonder if you have had the opportunity to see where, if we are trying to reach a point where it's sustainable, it means since it is driven by contributions, if the level of skill and in the country is low, well, the contribution to Social Security is going to be low. So if we have a large number of workers who are barely above the minimum wage, and we have a set of programs in the public system where we're basic with STEP and several others. I wonder if there was some discussion, or you thought of some discussion, if we took some of that same money and improve the skill set in the country, then the people would make more money, and then the contribution would be higher, since it's driven by contributions. So it seems to me that that is an issue we have avoided in Social Security. We have talked about increasing the age, but if you increase the age with the same level of pay, the contribution, it still remains the same. So what we need to do is to have, I'm wondering if you thought of the discussion where there is some partnership between the government, the private sector, and as Dr. Byron is saying, that civil society arm, to say, look, this is a national effort. Let us improve the skill set in the country. Because by doing that, if a man is making $2,000 as an unskilled worker, if he becomes a skilled worker, he would make $4,000 or more. That doubles the contribution. It seems to me in the discussion of Social Security, that element has been missing. So I just wanted to ask that. And then to Dr. Byron, I notice in CARICOM, it depends on which party is in power. In the Bahamas, the PLP is pro-Caribbean, but not the other party. Certainly in Jamaica, under Siaga, they were less CARICOM than Michael Manley's PNP. And now it is appearing in Trinidad that the PNM is more CARICOM than the present government. So depending on who is in power, you get good drafts with CARICOM, you get underwhelmed or overwhelmed. The thing, though, is that I think, and you mentioned it, I believe we spend a lot of time on the pomp and the pageantry. But I think we have to remind ourselves that CARICOM has the CXC and the University of the West Indies are themselves influenced, guided, directed by CARICOM in many instances. If we buy steel from Trinidad as opposed to buying it outside of CARICOM, it's cheaper. We have a common external tariff. And buying CARICOM products means that we pay less. I don't think so. We don't pay attention enough to that. And then we have the grouping of all the health agencies, CARFA, the Caribbean Public Health Agencies, where they drive health policy and so on. So I think putting on the suit and dressing up is the small part. The big part is health and education. And of course, the continuity with the country. So whoever is the prime minister of the country, they need to put CARICOM at the top of things, since together we make better moves to help the people. Thank you.
Brother Daniel, what else could I say? I couldn't have put it better myself. I couldn't have put it better myself, because the point is very, very well made. In fact, I did allude to a bit of that issue in one of the chapters, chapter 6 in my book, To Zip or Not to Zip the Purse, where the debate was around how much clout should the government have in terms of having a say in how Social Security money is well, in utilizing Social Security funds for public utility purposes, right? And what you mentioned about utilizing funds for improving the quality and scale of the human resource capacity for the entire federation, that is crucial in terms of raising the level of incomes and by extension the level of contributions into the fund. So in fact, I'll tell you something. The International Labour Organization in one of its training modules made the point regarding, and I'm reading from the book, the criterion of social and economic utility for investments, when it stated, it is in the interest of Social Security that funds are invested in such a way that they contribute to improve the health and education conditions or standard of living of the insured persons, and contribute to the creation of new means of production and new employment opportunities, contributing to an increase in national income and consequently to an increase in the standard of living. And in countries with capital scarcity, it's important that the amount of savings represented by the Social Security funds be placed at the disposal of the national economy for such purposes as you alluded to. So I couldn't have put it better myself when you asked the question. I don't really have anything to add. Your point is on the ball.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Hensley to repeat. I got so interested in the Social Security issue as I worked for 23 years in Jamaica and 6 years in Trinidad. I want to say something about that. It's more complicated than that.
No.
Yes, but no.
Yes, I was saying that in CARICOM, depending on which party is in power, there is strong support for CARICOM. As we see in the Bahamas, Pendling's PLP is pro-Caribbean, and for instance, in hosting things like CariFesta, and so sometimes they don't do it because they don't think it's relevant. Or in Jamaica, certainly, Manly was more pro-CARICOM than Seaga. And now you have the situation in Trinidad. It appears, that's what it appears.
Yeah.
But you need some consistency. And I was saying also that in relation to the the things that CARICOM does. You have the carbon external tariff. You buy CARICOM products, they're cheaper than if you buy them outside of CARICOM. And the public health agencies, which I think the education program in CARICOM needs to highlight these as opposed to the leaders in their suits and so.
Well, thank you. I think that CARICOM would do well to hire you as a public relations officer because you've made the case very, very professionally for CARICOM. CXC itself is a part of CARICOM, you know, so, you know, our education system is very much influenced by CARICOM. The thing is that what is ironic is that the biggest berater of CARICOM during the just concluded conference represents a country that is the biggest beneficiary of CARICOM trade. Trinidad controls 70% of CARICOM trade. So it's ironic. But these are the sort of arguments that we tend to hear when governments get together. But you really need to look at the hard data, and you will find that every country benefits in one way or another from CARICOM in various ways. One of the benefits for the average citizen that is less discussed but is very important is that whether we use it or not, we all have the right to live and work in any CARICOM country. Countries can make it more difficult for non-nationals, but the fact is that you have the right, and if you persevere, you can do it. It depends on the skill and the labor market and so on. But I have spent the largest part of my working life living and working outside of St. Kitts, outside of St. Kitts and Nevis. I have spent 29 years living and working in other CARICOM countries. I did not have bad experiences. I was welcomed. I felt comfortable, and I was able to pursue my professional life without discrimination in those countries. So I can attest to the value of the CARICOM labor market. And I think that still exists for many of us, and we all benefit from the skills of other people from other CARICOM countries, the skills and the talents who come here, just as we are able to offer other CARICOM countries our skills and enjoy the possibility of working there. So we should remember these things because they are important.
Thank you. At this point, if anyone has a question for Ms. Corinne, we will take those questions because young authors need a little extra sleep than the older ones. So she will have to leave shortly. So I see a hand for Ms. Corinne. Okay. We'll wait for the mic.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Nyala Maccabee, and I just had a couple questions. As somebody who's very interested in writing, I've been doing different forms of writing all my life, and I'm looking into writing different novels. So I wanted to know how was the publishing process, how you got funding, if an editor is a must, or you could do self-editing. And printing wise, where would you do printing?
Okay, so that was not for Ms. Corinne?
And that any other recommendations or tips for a young author?
Is that a hand with Corinne's mom wanting to answer?
Next question and then next one.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My sincere apologies for arriving so late. So, Corinne, if I ask you a question that you already said in your presentation, please forgive me. But I was curious about this book, Let's Talk About Friendship. As you know, we sell it at Bougainvillea Books and Gifts, and it's a big seller. And sometimes when people come in, they especially like that they see themselves or they see their friends, how hard was it for you to choose any friends to write about? Because I imagine you have a lot of friends that you can choose from. And I have another question for you. Are we to stand by for a book about your experience winning the Junior Calypso crown and performing with Marshall Montano? You may have said that already.
Okay, for the first question, wait, what did you say again?
Was it hard to choose the friends for your book? The friends that you chose to include in the book, was it hard to choose them?
A little bit, but I just chose the main ones currently that I spend the most time with. And for the second one, yeah, in my presentation at the end, I showed covers for 2 new books, and one of them is about the Junior Calypso Monarch.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Is
yes,
there
and
any
there's
more
one about
questions?
Marshall as well. Somebody is reminding me. Yes, great.
Do we have any more questions for Corinne? And then we'll get back to Miss Maccabee. Not for Corinne? So we'll hold on a moment. Well, is that for Corinne? Okay. Yes. We'll get back to
Hi,
you.
Corinne. I must congratulate you.
Thank you.
Is there any young author who you like to be like, who you like to emulate? Any young author who is very good and you like to?
Not at the top of my head right now.
So there is no one who inspires you?
Albert Einstein.
Hello?
Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein.
That's great. I'm impressed.
All right, thank you. And Miss Corinne would leave now? No, his question is not for Miss Corinne. It's for Miss Corinne? It's for the little girl? Right. So thank you, Miss Corinne.
Well, in the same vein that Corinne, at the one end of the spectrum has to leave, an 81-year-old man would like to leave.
Yes, your question. So can we answer the question that Miss Maccabee asked about publishing and getting started? Who will help us?
That's a question for me. Could you repeat what you said? Could you ask? Well, okay, let me say something. With the pamphlet I described, the 65-page, I'm appealing to memory. Anybody knew a gentleman called Ashley Brown who used those old printing press? You have to push this and push that in order to, something like that, in order to do the publication. Okay, that is at one end. The other end is because I was associated with the Heritage Society, they pointed me to contributors, donors, and for funding and stuff like this. Then you had OAS project was one of those. We also had other regional entities in order to fund the processing of putting the book together. Now, when it came at I suppose the higher end of Amazon Publishing was the last arrangement that we have and will continue to have, because it's to me it's quite accommodating. Does it answer any questions?
Anyone else on the panel?
Evening, Dr. Whitaker. My name is Heather Ferguson. I'm an AC student. With the increase of the non-communicable diseases in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I'm sure in your work you have publicized those diseases and the plans that can be used to combat such diseases. Do you think that these books should be publicized more, especially to highlight the medicinal purposes?
Well, I would agree with that, but as any doctor around here will tell you, I'm not going to be reading any book. So maybe what we'll have to do, in a sense, is to do some YouTube short inputs and so on for people, rather than any
Recording
longer
stopped.
things.
All right. We have a question here. Wait for the mic. And then I see Mr. Alistair. Oh, yes, your hand was up.
I have a question for Dr. Byron. So, why did you start? Why did you publish books, and when did you start?
Thank you very much for your question. Most of my publishing has been not of books, but of articles, because, well, don't know if this is a good reason. I worked in universities, and very often you publish in academic journals. So you do like a paper on something. That paper might be about 25 to 30 pages on a particular topic. I would say that I started publishing probably when I was a PhD student. That's often where you really start that type of publishing. It's not really fun publishing. I think it's probably much more enjoyable not to have to write on academic subjects. Sometimes they are interesting, but many times they are not. But there's a saying that you will hear academics using sometimes, publish or perish, because you have to have a certain rate of publishing in order to stay in the game, right? You are assessed every 3 years, usually 3 to 4 years, on your output, and your contract is renewed or not renewed, depending on if you have reached or exceeded what you should be producing during that time. So, and most of us, we end up finding subjects that interest us, and we enjoy doing the research. But you're also driven by this figure that over a 3 to 4 year period, you have to produce a certain amount of work in order to stay in the game.
Thank you.
Sorry? Publish or perish, or publish or get out of that area of work. But apart from that, if you are an academic, and even if you're not an academic, we genuinely enjoy debating ideas. We like hearing about other people's ideas, and we like exchanging ideas with other people. We like going to gatherings and exchanging this sort of thing. It's enjoyable. And I like also hearing ideas from people who are in different disciplines. I enjoyed very much listening to Dr. Whitaker and listening to yourself speaking about social security, which of course is very important to me at this stage of my life. And also because I have to draw security from different countries, which is complicated in itself. So there is, we learn so much from reading other people's work and from listening to other people talk about their work. I learned a lot from listening to the little young lady who has gone home now. Yes. I really enjoyed listening to her ideas about the importance of friends, and also the satisfaction she gets from imagining and writing and dreaming and sharing that with her friends, you know? And I hope that I will be able to see her doing workshops with other children, because I think they're at the most creative stages of their lives, you know, and they have so much to offer us and to offer each one another.
Just before the question from the front here, right? The person who was asking about publishing. Whilst there might be some traditional publishing models where you sign up with a publisher, and as the doctor was saying, that they expect you to produce a certain amount of material in a certain number of years, there's also the aspect of self-publishing, which is now very common, where persons actually advertise online that they can help you self-publish. And that is the mode that I chose when I was producing this book. I went online, I put in a search online, and a lot of them just simply came up, and I read the information and I chose one. This one, for example, is Bookstand Publishing out of somewhere in the United States. And I connected with them, and I got their full dossier. And well, of course, it means that you have to put the money up out of your own pocket. Mm-hmm. And that is a challenge, because if you really don't have the money, it means that you're stuck. You have to be prepared to put some money out there when you're doing self-publishing. And just hope that it catches on. Thankfully for me, they took care of everything, including getting the ISBN number and all that sort of stuff, and putting it up on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and what have you. And also gave me the opportunity to purchase copies for me to sell for myself. Mm. So I was able to get copies to be sold in St. Kitts and Nevis, while persons overseas were able to access it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. So that is one methodology. But the part about having a publisher that you sign up with and so on, I am not familiar with that process. So.
Just a little addition to the young lady back there. Earlier today, I ran into someone who, because the new rodent plants, asked me something in relation to marijuana and people who were actually undergoing chemotherapy. The specific input was about something called CDB. Never mind what it stands for, but it's a substance in the marijuana that, in a sense, will help you to cope with not only sleeping, but also for the cancer treatment. I did devote 3 pages to that particular marijuana descriptions in the book. I think it would be insightful to read it. I must also disclose that I have no inputs at all into the marijuana engagements in the country. At all, but I will say that it would be very helpful if that consideration is taken into place, because the person did also say that they got relief in their crisis from somebody local who made a marijuana concoction. Well, you might not want to be adventurous as that, but it would be useful. Okay?
Yes?
This is a question for Dr. Milton Whitaker. You spoke about the loss of a couple of plants and trees in your presentation. How can this loss be prevented, and whose responsibility is it to do so?
Well, a number of persons, I suppose. Agriculture is number one. Some of the NGOs, I suppose. And, well, in relation to those rare trees, I believe that the people, the church members or the ministers or something like that can take that in hand. But now you mentioned that we have been unable to find some of the plants, and according to Dr. Brown, who is in agroforestry, that may be as a result of the use of chemicals. Although we're not using, well, we should not be using as much chemicals as when we had the sugar industry. But I had stopped eating boiled peanuts when I saw a certain farmer. Well, in his lot, I passed in the morning, there were a lot of grass with the nuts and so on, but when I passed back in the afternoon, you could see that the weeds were dying. But I realized his predicament was that he couldn't get people to hand weed, so he used the chemical. But I did not want to go into that chain. And these days, especially that we're using a lot of plant-based diets, I think we should really be very careful when it comes to these, the use of the chemicals.
So I see Mr. Alistair, then the student. Do you still have a question? Yeah. Is Ms. James still online? Okay, so let's hear from Alistair and then...
Good evening.
I saw your hand.
I have two questions, one for Mr. Cecil Hamilton, Great Plains, and one for Dr. Bryant. But before I ask my questions, it would be remiss of me if I didn't indicate that I became an author quite by accident, but my genre is nothing like these distinguished persons before me. And this part of my answer will also help Ms. Maccabee. I'll just add to what Mr. Hamilton was saying, in that, yes, there are a number of self-publishing houses online. They are very aggressive, very good, but you can benefit from it if you do your reading because there are different packages. For instance, he said that his package had everything done, but you can outsource your cover, you can do some of the editing yourself, and choose a packet that closer suits your pocket. Additionally, when you buy books to sell, you'll buy them at a much reduced cost. For instance, a book that will sell on Amazon for $10 may cost you, in author's price, maybe $1.50 or $1.99 per book. So those are the two tips that I had for you in relation to what you asked and in relation to what Mr. Hamilton was saying. Now for my questions. Mr. Hamilton, we are well aware that, yes, governments do borrow money from Social Security, the Social Security powers, and the whole aspect of zip it was picked up by you. However, what you didn't point out is that governments don't like to pay back. And we are well aware in the sense of the whole land for debt, as a means of solving that problem. So I would like you to elaborate a bit on if you think that this kind of activity is sustainable among governments in the region. That's for you, Mr. Hamilton. And over to you, Dr. Byron. On one hand, we hear the leaders in CARICOM talk about the need for CARICOM unity and so on, the political agendas, the economic agendas. On the other side of their mouth, we hear them talking about they walk different paths, especially as relates to national security and relation with other international agencies. How then can Summitry assist in bridging that gap? Thank you.
Okay, first of all, in relation to the question of government borrowing, as you said, right? In my knowledge, I'm not aware of us having that difficulty in St. Kitts and Nevis as yet. I'm not aware. In fact, the latest information I had up until the time when I was most active in Social Security was that we did not have that problem, but that we knew of that challenge in some of the CARICOM countries. Because every loan to government comes under the institution's investment portfolio. And those investments are managed just like any other investments, right? Whoever borrows would pay back. So as I said, I'm not aware of that affecting St. Kitts and Nevis negatively to date. I don't know if anything has happened recently of which I'm not aware, but my best knowledge is that that has not been a problem for St. Kitts and Nevis. And most of the loans that are made, as I recall, in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis, has been like things like housing and education. Well, in the education part, the monies would normally be put into Development Bank, and Development Bank actually do the actual lending. But Social Security itself would have made direct loans to government in relation to housing. And as I said, those, to the best of my knowledge, have never been a problem. So not too bad. We're not too bad there.
Thank you. Do you mind just repeating my question?
On that side.
Yes, I couched it by saying that on one hand, we hear the leaders talk about their commitment to Caribbean unity, but on the other hand, they talk about walking different paths, especially with regards to national security and the relationship with other international countries and agencies.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you think that Summitry can help to bridge that gap.
Yeah. Well, I would start by saying, first of all, that in any regional organization, the final decisions and final positions are always the result of a number of compromises and balancing different priorities. On the question of security, CARICOM stretches over 1,000 miles. And the security situation for Trinidad, facing the Gulf of Paria and Venezuela, and the security situation for the Bahamas, on the other hand, these are two completely different things. So they have to, while they will arrive at certain joint positions, they do have to take account of differing national priorities and differing national emergencies and allow, space for countries to take their own decisions on their own specific national problems. So there is always that balancing act. And usually the national security discussions are closed sessions, and none of us outside of the room would know exactly what happens there. But what we do know is that they come out giving broad support for what individual countries have decided to do, as long as it doesn't infringe other countries' interests too much. And then there are certain areas on which they can agree. They probably had a joint position on Haiti, for example, and they would have joint positions on certain other things. But they, on national security questions, they tend to prioritize the position of the country that is most affected by the situation and give broad support to that country's position. And with any regional grouping, it's always a balancing act. And in the end, you choose the decision that is most acceptable to the largest number of people, and that does not terribly damage the interests of anybody. I think that is the way it goes.
Okay, so I have a question here, and I have Zoe and the gentleman. Where's the microphone? Okay, so the young lady there.
Okay, good night, everyone. As a librarian, I think all the presentations were really good. I think it shows that we as statisticians, we are interested in presenting information relating to our culture that could contribute to the generation coming along. My comment was going to Dr. Whitaker, but he left. The thought was that the information that he presented, for instance, in the book about plans, we realized that, to me, I realized that the culture of transferring information in that regard is kind of dying out. And I know that the Ministry of Culture, I think it is, they're doing a documentary on persons who contributed in that regard. You know, something like that. I hope that he would be one of the persons who would be able to get that kind of publicity, so that, you know, the next generation would have that information that they can tap into, which is, you know, kind of more accessible via the YouTube and those type of forums. Moving on to Chester Hamilton. What's it? Mr. Hamilton, yes. I think your presentation sparked a lot of interest. Just giving a summary of what you presented on your book, I think that one of the thoughts that I had was relating to the change that Social Security is trying to implement. I hope that they are thinking along the lines of considering persons who have challenges outside of what was unfamiliar to what existed before. In terms of, for instance, to me, a lot of mental challenges exist, sometimes a lot of mental fatigue. It's just you speaking about the book makes me want to go and read it to know what I can capture, knowing that I am a Social Security payer and a person who would be eventually going to that stage where I will be using Social Security as a form of income. The next thing that I thought of was, as somebody who was writing and somebody who was a part of the staff there, did you have a challenge in terms of code of ethics? Did you have to inform the institution that you were writing about them, and was that a factor that you had to face with? Those are my questions.
Okay, I actually wrote the book after I had demitted office. And it was not a book strictly about the organization, the St. Kitts and Nevis Social Security Board. It was not an expose, if you will, on the operations of the Social Security Board. Parts 1 and Part 2 are really essays dealing with relevant issues pertaining to Social Security, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, CARICOM, OACS, whatever, right? Issues that all of them grapple with. Issues about sustainability, issues about governance, issues about how they deal with change, right? So it was not as if it was classified information that I had to ask them for permission to do it. That is the question of the code of ethics. I suppose that would have applied if I was using a Social Security platform to advance a particular personal point of mine. That was not the case. So I would contend that that would not have been an issue in terms of having to abide by a quote-unquote code of ethics, right? Chapter 8 of the book, which is part 3, deals with the issues which, the first two parts, right, are really boring. Because essays are generally boring. I mean, mostly intellectuals might say, oh, I would want to read that essay. But the ordinary man ain't going to read that essay, right? But
And that is the reason why I thought to include part 3, which deal with the issues. And some of them, for example, this whole question of taxation without representation when it comes to self-employeds. This year is the 30th anniversary of self-employed coverage, 30 years of, although strictly it's not taxation, you still have to look at it analogically as taxation. And there's no representation. And we all know that that is a maxim that has come from way back. No taxation without representation. And since an opportunity was raised when the membership of the board was increased from 8 to 12, then, for God's sake, that should be an opportunity to include self-employed. Now, it's true that it can be done just by a minister saying, well, 2 of the persons who I appoint could do that, but I wanted to put in law. I wanted to be enshrined. And that's the reason why I took the opportunity in the book to actually draft the legislation for it to be done. And it's right there in the book so that the ministers wouldn't have any problem. All they have to do is to pass it through their legal people and say, okay, fix that there, put a dot here, whatever it is. I drafted it so that it would make it easy because I felt that self-employeds make a significant contribution to the Social Security Fund for 30 years now. And so by right, they should have representation on the board. And my suggestion was that since you now have 12 members of the Social Security Board, at least 6 of them would still be available to represent government. If 2 are representing employers, as the law already says, 2 represent employees, as the law already said or says, and 2 to represent self-employed persons, as the proposal is suggesting. So that would be 6, and government still has the 50%, so they don't have to fear of being overwhelmed. I think it's so simple. And then you have this whole thing about 8 out of the last 13. The title of this issue is 8 out of the last 13, Shield versus Sword. When the fund was first established, there was a rule that to qualify for a sickness benefit, you have to have 8 out of the last 13 weeks paid into Social Security. If you had worked for 20 years before and then was off and then went back to work and you ain't covered at 8 out of the last 13, you can't get a sickness benefit. And I'm like, this was supposed to be a shield against a young and budding Social Security fund, but should not be used as a sword against persons who now need the help when the fund could well afford it. I mean, come on. And then persons undergoing imprisonment or detention. You want to tell me that if a person worked faithfully all their life, right? And then for some reason they fall afoul of the law, close to retirement, and then they are in prison, they cannot get a benefit once they are a ward of the state in a prison, when that person might well have commitments to housing. I mean, well, not even children, but the point is, what if that person has a mortgage that they're paying, that when they come out of prison they need to have a house? They will lose the house, but that's double jeopardy. That's punishing a person twice. So these are some of the issues that I raise here. Plus, the one about the age 57 limitation for self-employed persons. Because they believe that self-employeds could manipulate and find a way to cheat the system, this was put in place saying, after age 57, you cannot raise your income. And I have an issue described there which says that that is not really as just as it might sound, and that it should be revisited. And so it goes. But I was going into more details about the book. So
all right,
sorry to expand so much.
We'll take 2 more. That's Zoe and the gentleman at the end there.
Good night. I have 2 questions.
My first question is, what was your inspiration to create your books? And what encouragement would you give to people who would like to also write their books? It goes to the both of you or whoever would like to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Zoe. I have a feeling that Mr. Hamilton's comments will be more relevant than mine. Well, let me start first of all by saying that if you work in a university, you have an obligation to write. Your continued employment there depends on it. And you are supposed to meet a certain level. Most universities have a required output target over a 3 or 6 year period. But people don't just write under duress. We write because we are interested in different issues in the world. Maybe we fool ourselves that what we write is going to change things. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And you research and you write for your own enjoyment, and also because you feel it serves a useful purpose. And also you have an obligation to contribute to knowledge. This is what universities and research are created for. As human beings, we live in a world that keeps on changing. And one of the things we can all do, whether we are in that academy or not, is to keep observing and keep trying to interpret the meaning of what we see and what we experience and where we think our world is heading. Our world is evolving very rapidly these days. And anything that any of us can contribute to understanding these events helps or will help somebody. So all of that is important in terms of writing, you know. And then there is the other side of writing, which is maybe more enjoyable, where you write for the pure joy of expressing your thoughts and using words. Words are beautiful. Yes. And we write for those purposes as well. And hopefully the reader gets as much enjoyment from it as the writer gets from expressing it.
From since I was small, I used to like reading. I grew up on Enid Blyton and Famous Five and Hardy Boys and all them things there, right? I was just fascinated, right? And I always fantasize about being a writer. And then I got into poetry during my high school years. Poetry, which was quite rewarding, as I said. I won a competition, a national competition. And those days, television was just coming into sync. It's black and white TV, I said. And I feel like a big deal for me to go upstairs. I said, go get me prize, a bike on TV. I said, I'm a writer. But then I got into work and so on, and I recognized that there was a dearth of information about Social Security locally. As I indicated in my remarks, only a couple of persons would have written stuff about Social Security. St. John Payne and somebody else, I can't remember the other person, would have written things about Social Security. And I say, hey, well, if I have all these years in Social Security, why not? And so when I got the opportunity to do the reflections during an engagement that we had as regional Social Security practitioners, I said, let me write. Let me write, and let me write. But then I also had other ideas about the issues in chapter 8. And I said, let me write. Let me write. But one of the things that was in the back of my mind too was that hopefully that it would inspire somebody else to do more writing on social security issues in St. Kitts and Nevis. Plus, and very importantly, I wanted to make sure that students, particularly in the college, just like yourself, would have an opportunity to read this stuff and be inspired to do your own writing, your own research, because I soon dead. But we need persons like yourselves to come into the thing and start writing literature, as you said, literature. Our people have to write. Don't mind that people are not reading, quote unquote, books anymore. People still reading. They're reading in different forms. So write. But what are they going to read if nobody writes? So write. That was one of my big inspirations. I said, listen, I wanted to hopefully inspire younger persons to write too. And I'm hoping that some of the persons in Social Security now could do writing that would even, this thing that I wrote, right, is small matters. I'm sure that there are people who could write even more interestingly and more wide about Social Security issues than this. But I said, let me just make this start, and hopefully somebody will pick up and carry on. So, I'm looking for you.
Yes?
Yes, I must commend the presenters again for insightful, instructive presentations. And the organizers, I must commend Lady Daniel, especially because last year, you see there's an increase in attendance, an increase in engagement and interaction over last year. So I want to encourage you to continue. But my question is to Dr. Byron. Dr. Byron, you seem to be very fascinated with the personalities, the leaders. I too am very fascinated with political personalities. But you mentioned Barrows, Burns, Bonham, Eric Williams, and Eugenia Charles. I'm interested to find out if there is any St. Kitts Nevis leader who you were fascinated by. As you said, the idiosyncrasies of these leaders, some would have left their mark on the character of the summit. Again, is there any St. Kitts Nevis leader who you're fascinated by? I mean,
you're not referring to this summit. You mean over the years? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There is a former head of Mona campus of UWI, Sir Kenneth Hall, Professor Kenneth Hall, and one of the things that he devoted himself to, I think before his retirement, was to compile speeches of Caribbean leaders at various summits over the years. So the first one was called Integrate or Perish, Perspectives of Leaders of the Integration Movement. And that went from, 1963 to 1999. And he did a follow-on. He did a sequel, which continued with leaders after that. But I found this book fascinating because it has some of the most famous utterances of people like Forbes Burnham, who was a brilliant man. He was a brilliant pain in the neck, but the brilliance was there. Eugenia Charles, they often clashed with each other. Errol Barrow, who had many very interesting things. All of them. And many of these are people who we may have known, have heard of them from a distance, but when you read what they were thinking about at a particular period in time, or what they expressed about a particular crisis, and our region has had many crises, it is very interesting, and their speeches, Ken Hall compiled years of speeches that were made by these people, and they come alive. They come alive, and the times in which they were operating then also come alive when you read these things. So I found this compilation and one that followed it, I think, Integrate or Perish, Perspectives of Leaders of the Integration Movement, 1963 to 1999. I've learned a lot from going through some of this. I haven't read the whole thing, but you things that are never even mentioned when you read some of these speeches, you get new insights into some of our history. There are interesting reflections by Mr. Bradshaw, our own premier, during much of that period, and by other leaders as well. I'm sure there are speeches by Paul Southwell as well, and then the people who followed in their footsteps. So I've found it fascinating. I can't take it in large doses, but every now and then I go and I read a bit of it and I learn a bit more.
Okay, I think Alistair wanted to
Madam
just
Chair,
comment, and then that's...
If you permit me, allow Zoe, I wanted to add to your answer by saying sometimes there's no motivation, no inspiration. And with that, I'll share my experience. I got a cardiovascular accident, in common language, a stroke. And being in the hospital, your body not allowed to move, but of course your mind is racing. And when they asked me, what was I thinking about while lying in the bed? I said from small days, growing up, even up till now. And the therapist said, write it down. And the next day, she threw a notepad at me. And so I wrote down all my feelings and got a manuscript. The manuscript then was sent on to a self-publishing company, and they did everything else. A cover, editing. Of course, it costs a bit of money, but my book is at customs now, and I have a book pledge on the outside. Yes, Bougainville, you'll be hearing from me again. Okay. And yes, Mr. Richards, I'll be dropping a few copies up there with gift wrap paper. So don't wait until you're down and out like me, or down but not out. As the lady said, find a topic and start to write. You'll enjoy it. And my book pledge is outside. You can pledge to buy a copy or two or three or four. Limitless.
Thank you. Mrs. Daniel? You'll make the presentation to the authors now.
Incidentally, you can find copies of my book at Bougainville as well, and Laws and Harper's. Yeah.
We are very grateful for the contribution by our authors and to assist me in making a presentation to those who are here. Is Miss Cassandra Nesbitt. So we now call we say ladies first. So let's call Dr. Jessica Bryant. Mr. Cecil Hamilton. And our moderator for this evening, Miss Claudia Walwyn. When I asked her, she willingly consented. And the other authors will get their gift. We also have a token for Dr. Cameron Gill, who will bring the closing remarks.
Okay. Pleasant good night to all. We can't say good evening anymore, it's good night now. Thank you for coming and supporting the Authors Forum. Let me begin my closing remarks by repeating the admonition from Dr. Byron. Publish or perish. Now, even if you don't work in academia, I would say that's a good ethos. So I would modify and say, write or perish. Whether it's fiction or non-fiction, if there's something, if there's an idea inside of you, don't let that idea die with you, okay? Whether it's poetry, prose, fiction, non-fiction, or whatever it is, bring it out. Write it and get it published, okay? You may think that nobody may want to read it. You will be surprised. So whatever idea you have, don't let it die with you. Write or publish. Okay, so beginning my closing remarks on the perspective that I gained from the various authors, from our youngest author, Corinne Clark, who I would say is an inspiration to all of us. Okay? Whether you're 9 or 90, she is indeed an inspiration. And so what I gained from her is dream big, and pursue those dreams. You are never too young or too old to make those dreams a reality, okay? So it's never too early or too late to become an author. Bear that in mind. There's no age limit, whether minimum or maximum, on becoming an author. She also spoke about friendship, and I want to make a brief comment about that. Unfortunately, we now live in a time of division, okay? Greater ethnic, racial divisions, and even the virtue of diversity is being questioned by various people. We're seeing increasing popularity of populist leaders in USA and Europe. But what Corinne noted that her best friend, she's of African descent, her best friend is of Indian descent. So she reminded us that diversity is a beautiful thing. There's a reason why our planet was created with people who don't all look alike and sound alike. Okay? There's a reason why we were created that way. So Corinne reminded us that diversity is a beautiful thing. And so do not be afraid to make friends with people who may look different to you, treat differently to you, speak a different language, etc. Dr. Whitaker, his writing was inspired by nature, specifically by plants. So he created a body of work, not just one book, but an entire body of work inspired by the environment that we take for granted. We live on a Caribbean island that people spend a lot of money to travel from around the world to come here on vacation or to buy a property and retire here. And we tend to go around every day and take it for granted. But he reminded us of the paradise that we live in and the importance of protecting that natural heritage. Some of our flora has already gone extinct, as he pointed out. So it is our responsibility, not just government, but our collective responsibility to protect our natural heritage. Dr. Melissa James, she showed the importance of being flexible in life which were challenges at us. She pivoted from a planned legal career to business management. And the pillars that guided her in life were volunteering, following her passion, and giving back to her community. And it is through her passion that led her to be able to leave a multi-million-dollar company, Google, because she saw a need for something that the company, yes, they provided her with an employment opportunity, but there was a need not being fulfilled, and she left that company to start her own business so she could help empower black and brown people like herself to find a job and create a meaningful career. So her passion for empowering people led to her writing a book where she could advise people on building a career. Cheslin Hamilton, authors can, through their writing, raise awareness, provoke reflection, and stir discussion on social and economic issues. Now, if we are fortunate, we will live to see retirement age. If you're fortunate, whether you are an employee in an institution or you're self-employed. So, the sustainability of Social Security is an issue that affects all of us, from Corinne's age, come right up to the oldest person in the room. So, what Chesley shared with us is food for thought and something that we should ponder very seriously. Dr. Jessica Byron, your presentation is timely because CARICOM has reached an important milestone. It's celebrating a half century, and as a historian, I would argue that while CARICOM has seen many challenges, right now it's probably facing the more severe challenges that it has faced since the end of the Cold War. We are seeing a renewal of the U.S. manifest destiny. Okay, President Trump has edited it with his Monroe Doctrine, his edition of the Monroe Doctrine. So CARICOM is facing, and some CARICOM leaders at the Trinidad PM have embraced that, where others are seeing it as a threat to our region. So your presentation is timely at a time when CARICOM is facing the greatest challenge it could face since the end of the Cold War. You're giving us a glimpse into how CARICOM operates at the highest level through summitry. And we can only hope that as leaders in the past would have, despite their differences and the challenges, would have been able to come together and push the region forward, that hopefully this generation will be able to do the same. But you have given us an insight into how the machine works at the highest level. To all of the authors, thank you for the varied insights that you have shared. You have represented a wide demographic in ages and wide expertise and perspectives from many genres. So again, thank you for what you've shared tonight.
All right. And we'll have the vote of thanks by Ms. Cassandra Nisbet, Library Assistant.
Good night, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, our prestige guests, esteemed authors, and all participants, on behalf of Mrs. Sonita Daniel and the organizing team, our committee, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made today's Authors Forum a success. First, I want to express my sincere appreciation to Ms. Tazia Williams for beautiful rendition of our national anthem, setting a tone for pride and unity for the occasion. We are grateful to Mr. Vikel Edward Douglas, our SGA president, for introducing our moderator, Ms. Claudia Walwin, a dedicated lecturer at this college, whose guidance ensured the smooth flow of today's occasion. Additionally, we extend our thanks to Claudia Harley, the administrative assistant who created the effort, for her creative effort in designing the event flyers and also the programs. Also, thanks to the entire CFBC family, our members, for their support, and I see the former chair, governor of the board. Thank you for embracing us with your presence this evening. Our deepest appreciation goes to our featured authors, Ms. Corey and Mayor Clark, one of our talented young authors, along with Dr. Milton Whitaker, Dr. Melissa James, Mr. Chesil Hamilton, and Dr. Jessica Byron, for sharing their insight, experience, and inspiring us with their literary contribution. Thank you. We also extend our gratitude to Dr. Cameron Gill, Senior Lecturer and Faculty Representative of Board of Governors, for delivering the closing remarks that beautifully encapsulate the essence of today's event. Thank you. A heartfelt thanks to Mrs. Elvira Lawrence for her generous donation. Thank you. Donation. Miss the MPS Catering for providing excellent refreshments that you will get this after this event. And the IT department, thank you so much for ensuring all technical aspects ran smoothly. Lastly, to all our attendees, speakers, and participants, your presence and engagement are what make this event meaningful. We hope you find the forum inspiring and enriching. We can't forget Mrs. Sonita Daniel, the person behind all of this. Thank you so much, Mrs. Daniel. I know she was telling me that she left here around 11. Yes. So thank you, Ms. Daniel, for putting this together. Once again, thank you for being part of this memorable occasion. We look forward to seeing all of you back here on the 20th of March for our 8th annual Poetry Circle. And we also look for volunteers, so if you're interested in coming to read your poem, you can speak to Ms. Sonita Daniel, and you can sign up. Thank you, and get home safely. Oh. Thank you very much.